6 drinks that changed the world and how they wrote history, written by the culture critic. Drinking. You do it every day. Water, tea, coffee, beer, wine, etc. Not a day passes when you don't consume one liquid or another. It is so fundamental to the human experience that we take it for granted. But when you actually dig into history of drinking and of beverages, a remarkable story emerges. Today is a dive into Tom's book, A History of the World in 6 Glasses, how drinks shape your day-to-day experience and history at large. Here is what your favorite beverage says about you and your connection to the great adventure that we call history. Beer, the great humanizer. In the Mesopotamian cradle of civilization, hunter-gatherers turned to agriculture around 10,000 BC. Grain, the most basic crop, led to 2 creations that would define human civilization: bread and beer. Though it's not certain when beer was invented, it's clear that for early civilizations it was synonymous with human life. While water is the most basic necessity of human life, beer is water that's been shipped by the most basic level of processing. Its ingredients, water, grains, and wild yeast, were available anywhere that human settlement took hold, and because it had to be boiled, it was safer than plain water. The same ingredients used to make bread, the staple food of civilization, could also be used to produce beer. On top of that, beer's fermentation process yielded protein and micronutrients that made it filling and nourishing. While water was considered nature itself, beer was a few steps removed. As such, it became symbolic of humanity's distinction from nature. This idea comes out clearly in the ancient Mesopotamian work, the epic Gilgamesh. When Gilgamesh gives beer to the wild creature Enkidu, he becomes tame and humanized. As the first and most universal processed drink, beer remains a symbol of humble enjoyment. Consumed by both rich and poor from the very beginning, it is to this day considered the great equalizer. Perhaps there's a reason both construction workers and bankers can head to the same pub for a pint after work. Wine, the growth of culture. From its origins, wine has been synonymous with expense, culture, and sophistication. It has been around since at least 6000 BC, but it wasn't until 870 BC that an Assyrian king popularized wine by serving it at an extravagant feast. From then on, it was a noble drink, rare, hard to transport, and royal. The demands required to produce it limited its production to warmer, fertile climates. This is why it remained rare in Mesopotamia, but caught on quickly in the Mediterranean, especially in Greece. Still to this day, it's hard to call ancient Greece to mind without picturing curling grapevines, white togas, and philosophers with a wine goblet in hand. Wine and Greece were the perfect pairing. Greek ideals of sophistication allowed drinkers to analyze the more nuanced profile of the drink, and its costliness reinforced the society's conviction of its own superiority. Greek intellectuals gathered in private homes for symposiums, essentially philosophical drinking parties attended by the likes of Socrates and Plato. This might seem counterintuitive. Why were philosophers consuming alcohol, a substance which dulled the mind rather than sharpening it? Greek philosophers weren't blind to this fact, and it's actually for this reason that they drank. Since wine opened the door to man's animal passions, it was a mark of strength to be able to drink without losing control. Socrates argued that drunkenness offered the benefit of allowing you to encounter your dark side and gain mastery over it. Rome later inherited Greece's love of wine, but rejected the associated hedonism. Instead of Dionysian indulgence, Romans viewed wine as a status symbol and a mark of disciplined work done well. The classical world's legacy of wine lives on today, even if subconsciously. While beer is a perfect drink for a backyard barbecue, it might seem out of place at formal events. Weddings, graduations, anniversaries, and dinner dates wouldn't feel quite right in the absence of a proper bottle of wine. Spirits, the race to the new world. The process of distillation, heating and cooling wine to extract its alcoholic components, emerged at the end of the first millennium. The burnt wine, or brandy in English, gained popularity initially as medicine. Distillation carries us into the 16th and 17th centuries, when the age of exploration revealed the existence of cane sugar in the New World. This lucrative crop required intensive labor to cultivate and process, so traders turned to slave labor. Hard spirits played a surprisingly front and center role during this time, when the transatlantic slave trade saw European, African, and the emerging Caribbean cultures collide. Brandy was used as currency for traders, and sugar gave rise to new spirits that would soon leave their own mark on history, rum being one of them. Popularized in the 17th century, rum emerged just in time for the age of sail. Since it was a more stable and concentrated drink than wine or beer, it became the travel-friendly drink of choice for sailors of all varieties, from pirates and privateers to the commanding officers in His Majesty's Royal Navy. For similar reasons, rum became the first drink of the nascent American colonies. Britain levied taxes on it due to its popularity, inciting a cat-and-mouse game on smuggling and taxation that exploded into the War of Independence in 1775. Underlying their distinction from the British Crown, American generals like Washington made sure to keep their troops well supplied with rum rotations. America's history would continue to be shaped by alcohol, thanks to both its trading power with Native Americans and the drama of the temperance movement. To this day, spirits retain a double-edged character. They can be enjoyed amongst both distinguished and everyday company. They can be tested in high society or thrown down carelessly in collegiate raves. Coffee, cognition in a cup. The 1600s saw the first gleams of the Enlightenment. It was a time when Galileo, Francis Bacon, and other luminaries advocated for empiricism, scientific observation, and rationality. The intense intellectual energy of this time was fueled by a new drink on the European breakfast table: coffee. Though discovered sometime in the first millennium AD, coffee remained primarily an Arabian drink until Pope Clement VIII's affinity for it opened the door to the West. This occurred just as England was taking a turn for Puritanism, so as alcohol consumption was cracked down on, coffee was introduced and it spread like wildfire. From the beginning, coffee has been linked with intellectual creativity. The first coffee house sprang up in Oxford, where Christopher Wren, the designer of London's St. Paul's Cathedral, went to exchange ideas with Isaac Newton. Within decades, thousands of coffee shops dotted the country, with middle-class intellectuals meeting regularly to discuss politics, philosophy, and world events. Coffee's psychotropic elements increase mental stimulation, creativity, and a sense of clarity. Arabia was the only producer of coffee beans for 2 centuries, but by the 18th century, Holland led the way to establish plantations in Java, Indonesia. France and England then started planting their own beans in locations still associated with coffee production today: Guatemala, Brazil, and more. With its power to elevate cognition, coffee is still the drink of intellectual discourse and creativity. Students study in coffee shops and flock to campus cafes, and coffee remains the preferred drink of artists, creatives, and intellectual powerhouses. Tea, sophistication, and power. Tea was invented in China, likely popularized by 6th century BC Buddhist monks. When Europeans encountered China in the 16th century, they established a regular trade of silk, spices, and tea. At first, tea was too expensive to be popular. It wasn't until 1660 when it was served at the marriage of King Charles II, Catherine of Portugal, that England warmed to it, and by the 1700s it had become England's drink enjoyed by commoners and nobility alike almost daily. The true character of tea, though, emerged as the drink of the Industrial Revolution in England, a revolution that might never have happened without it. The caffeinated drink freed workers' bodies from their natural circadian rhythms, so their energy to work no longer depended on the rhythms of the day. Britons could now run on man-made schedules. Tea also shaped the political landscape of late centuries. In the 19th century, the British East India Company relied on trading opium for China's main product, tea. There was just one problem. Opium eventually got banned in China due to its addictive and dangerous narcotic effects. Initially, this didn't stop the British from trading under the table, covering its tracks with generous bribes to Chinese officials. But when China cracked down on the flood of opium, depriving the British of their beloved tea, the resulting tensions exploded into the Opium Wars of 1839 to 1842. Britain's decisive victory over China, which up to that point was an undisputed world power, cemented the former's place as the new ruler of the world, until, that is, a new power and a new drink would steal her crown. Soda, the pause that imperializes. Britain's daughter colony of America once revolted due to harsh taxes on tea. Now, just as America would step forward to take Britain's place as the new global leader, a new beverage would supplant tea as the new drink of the everyman. The 19th century put America on the map as an industrial power. Since then, America's global dominance has been mirrored by the worldwide popularity of its signature drink, Coca-Cola. To America's supporters, Coca-Cola symbolizes mass culture, equality, and the rise of the working class. It represents greed, capitalism, and the destruction of culture. The first carbonated drink was invented in the 18th century as a medicinal cure against nausea and other minor complaints. Entrepreneurs later took sodium bicarbonated infused water, or soda, and added extra ingredients to gain a competitive advantage. In the 1800s, John Pemberton added in coca leaves and cola seeds, thus creating Coca-Cola. Coke struck gold, providing a caffeinated drink to fill the gap left by the temperance movement. From there, it's a story of marketing success and a case study of the rags to riches mythos that fueled the American dream. Coke accompanied America's presence on the world stage when US soldiers carried it in their rations in the 20th century. As the world entered the era of post-war peace and rebuilding, Coke extended its production around the world. With it came a sense of American identity and philosophy, namely that people have the right to pursue happiness within the context of a liberal democracy. It's also worth noting that next to OK, that is okay, Coke is the most known English word in the world. With coca leaves crossed off the ingredient list, Coke is no longer psychotropic. Perhaps, though, it's something even more powerful, the icon of a new hedonism, the determination to enjoy life just because you can.